Welcome to Security Today. I am your host, Uncle Baer. This podcast is brought to you by Sprinter Business Solutions, and we are back for another Bid2Bank episode. You saw our first episode, and we're going to just keep rolling with guys out there that are grinding away with their own companies and doing their own thing. And so we want this podcast to really come in and kind of hit that project life cycle so that you can walk away with some nuggets, that you can implement in your own strategies just to be the better tech and be the better company. So this week, we got Mik from Trican Security, one of my good friends. He's in the Trican gang. If you know, you know. But yeah, we've known each other since through the Tech Knowledge Worldwide community. And we had the opportunity to get on a charity project together and just kind of hit it off there. So I wanted to have him on because he's one of the guys that I see doing some of the cleanest work out there. Kind of having the truest and purest heart. So I wanted to get him on here and just kind of run through what he does in that Bid2Bank. If you remember from seeing our first episode, we're going to go through a couple of questions that just kind of touch on marketing and sales, touch on the bid, engineering and quoting, the project management of projects, the customer experience, the bank, how you deposit and how you run the money side of it, and then the question of what can we do better. And the bonus question and we'll get to that when we get to that. But Mik, thanks so much for being here, man. I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I've been dying to do these video podcasts for a while now, so I'm really glad that you're my runner up here to get in and get on this podcast with me. But why don't you just tell the listeners kind of how you got into security, like what your company is and what you do, and just kind of a little bit of an intro.
Yeah. You know what, Baer? Thanks for having me, because I've actually been a listener of yours for a while before we even, formally got to work together and really, learned each other and met each other formally. But it's kind of cool that I listened to your stuff, and now, I'm on this podcast with you this time. So I was happy about that. Happy when you asked me to come on here.
Definitely.
I'm an owner operator, Trican Security. We're running out of, the Baltimore, Maryland area, the whole DMV. So we operate and we specialize in surveillance, access control, intrusion, do a little bit of structured cabling as well. But that's kind of where we cut our teeth. So it's probably 5 years of, existence for the company and making progress. It's growing every year, and everything's getting better, and we're getting into more complex stuff, more of the, I call it kind of niche areas. There's a lot of people that do this thing, but there are not a lot of people who can do that. So that's kind of where our specialty is. Some of that, like, I can't do it, but I know a guy. So that's kind of where we fit in.
Right on. How'd you get into it?
So originally, my original background is a software developer, right? I was a solutions architect for a while, and a buddy of mine, he was into physical security. He's doing a lot of installs. He's my hard hat guy, that's what I tell people. He was my hard hat guy, and he started, talking to me about it, and I started to look into it, and it was making sense. And I've always been a hands-on kind of person, so being a software architect was kind of like boring. So after a while, it was like, this is like the best of both worlds. I can keep my IT and keep those dirty fingernails. So that's kind of what led me towards down this path. And, I don't look back. I've enjoyed the ride, and it's fun to me, to see things come together, to build them with your own hands, and also, for instance, today I spent my morning troubleshooting some products that were lost on a network. So, that's it just brings those two worlds together for me. So, and I like it. I like what I do, and I like the security part of it because it helps people. And I've always had that, that little soft spot for helping people, and security does help people. There's no other way to say it. You come in and some of these clients, they'll talk to you about all the bad things that have happened to them. And you just can't help but think, you know what, I can help you. I can do something for you. We can fix this.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the reasons I want to have you on here, just because that's kind of the heart of the podcast. I try to push through every episode that, we're on a level when you're implementing security, you're on a level out there that you're actually helping people and keeping people safe, and it matters. I did AV for a long time, and that was like the coolest stuff that you could imagine. Interconnecting it and programming it and having screens roll down in theater mode and the lights drop and everything like that. But there's just a niche in security, just that corner in my heart that gets filled up when you know that you're putting, access control in place where maybe like a vagrant or a straggler or someone coming into the office that's being followed or anything like that, they can get to a safe space. And that matters, man. That matters. So I'm glad you're on
It
here. Well, let's
does.
get. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if I could do it for free, I might, but
Yeah. Yeah.
bills got to get paid.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, let's get into the interview. So, from Bid2Bank, we like to start right there at the top of marketing and sales. And I just love to hear how different guys kind of come into the work that they come into. And so, what form of marketing have you kind of had most success with? You've been doing it for 5 years now. That's no chump change, man. You've seen your ups and downs. And can you kind of describe a project maybe in the last year, something that you use that marketing approach? That's your favorite to kind of get a hold of?
I'm still struggling with the whole marketing thing. I'll be real honest with you. So I've tried different things from direct mail to email blasts to paying for leads. And I would say this, the one thing that really works is good work. And what
Mm,
I say by that is it's word of mouth. That's the only thing that has really brought it in for me. And I'm still investigating other ways to get it, but usually I get that call or I'll handle a big deal. It's because somebody told somebody else that's your guy,
mm-hmm.
right? So, I mean, I've done the other things, buying leads, advertising. Website traffic is very, very slow. I mean, it's just, I mean, yeah, you can put up a website, you can do your best, you can SEO optimize it, but at the end of the day, our kind of customer isn't really just Googling, right? They're not Googling it. It's too important to just Google it. So, and then you find other clients do different. Like I find a few from paid leads, but they're real hit or miss, right? Because you buy the lead, and then all of a sudden this person is like, "Oh yeah, I want to put some ring cameras up." And it's like, not the guy for that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's already too late. But and I think that's kind of where I fit in really because it's usually somebody calling in and saying, I got rid of something out of the box. I got something difficult. I got delayed egress mag locks plugged into an alarm system, plugged into this, plugged into that. And I was like, I need to keep it going. My last guy, he was a referral, and he actually knew access control, right? And he knew access control, and I really took pride in working with him because he was one of those guys out there in the field installing. But he got this thing, and he was like, I don't know where to make heads or tail of this. Like I opened up the wall and it was a complete rat's nest. You know what I mean? Like he was like, and I wanted to call somebody who was not going to tear the whole building apart, who could just work on this and understand it and bring it to life. So, you know, I've done a lot of marketing, but I would still say, I don't really get my real customers, my big ones, except through word of mouth. And maybe that's part of the slow growth of everything, but it's just where it is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I eat. And when I say it's work, right? Because it's not just wow that guy is fast or he's cheap. It's like no, he figures this stuff out.
Mm.
The installs are clean. The finished product is good. I don't have problems with it. You want to go there?
Yeah, it's like that. So you're saying it's like that gumption to tackle a big problem, and then when you can
Yeah,
find that solution, getting someone out of a jam like that is more gold than any sort of like
100%.
Facebook ad or anything like that.
100%. You could
Yeah.
spend thousands on leads and Facebook ads and all this stuff. I mean, because I was at one point I was doing Google ads and they really turned me off because at first, they get you on the phone. It's like, oh yeah, maybe $11 a click. Okay, I could work with that. Then when I got the bill one day, it was like $180 a click.
Mm.
And I was like, wait a second, $180 a kick. And then they started getting into like, well, it's the algorithm. And me from a programmer, right? I'm an ex software guy.
Yeah, yeah,
When you
yeah.
tell me the word algorithm, you just told me you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you tell me, oh, it's the algorithm, it's like, yeah, so you telling me you don't even understand what you're selling, and you can't explain it to me. So that was like a key word for me. So I was out of that. That it was only a few days, and they rung up a couple $100 worth of bills, and that was it. I was like, you know what, I'm done with this because it was, a click is not a sale. It's
Right.
really not.
Right.
So I'm out of that game. And then it was just I got back to what I did best, and it was like word of mouth, right? And I call up my old clients, hey, what can I do for you?
Mm.
It's just what can I do for you? And it's not I'm trying to make sales. It's like tell me about what's going on, tell me how I can help. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, definitely. So when you get those word of mouths and someone calls you up and they're like, "Hey, I know this guy. He used you guys, and you really helped him out. I need you to quote this job, or I have this problem." What sort of do you use quoting software, or do you just kind of go off the top of your head, or how do you approach that when you got to build the
So
quote?
so on the spot, I'll ballpark them, right?
Hmm.
On the spot. And ballpark is not this is a rough number. I'll give you a range. If I go sit down there and you got this many cameras, I'll tell you, hey, this might be about 140K. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Just for instance. And then when I get back, I'll tell them, let me run the numbers. And for me, it's a spreadsheet. Like I told you, I'm an ex nerd, so I
Yeah,
have really complicated spreadsheets. So I kind of just bring in my pricing on products, and I have a process, right? So if it's a camera, that means it's got several things associated with every camera. So it's the price of the camera, it's the markup that I put on the price of the camera, it's the cost to cable, which is my generic cost for that type of cable. I mean, this day and age, Cat 6 is everything, right? So if I tell you, hey, it costs me $150 per drop, right? Well, a camera is a drop. We'll throw that in there. Whatever your price is. Platinum is different. There's all kinds of things, and price of cable changes all the time. But you get your price for cable, right?
hmm
So a camera is a camera. The markup on the camera, the price I make on a drop, that's to run the cable. And then, are we talking wall mounts? Are we exterior junction boxes? And then software licensing, and then
hmm
I add in a generic, I call it my per port fee, right? And that's my switching.
Okay.
So, camera needs a switch. So per port fee, you add in X number of dollars and say, okay, based on if I get a 48 port switch for $1,000, then 48 ports is what, 50 something bucks. So per port, you're paying probably about, you know, 40, $50, right?
hmm Yeah, yeah.
And that's how you price out your switching. That it's just all the pieces to the puzzle. So, when somebody sees the final price and they're like, well, that camera was this much money, and it's like, okay, well, you need a software license, you need cabling, you need
Right.
wall mounts, you need a switch to power it. It's like when I tell you it's roughly this much per camera, it's really that's a loaded price. That's everything. So, and then I kind of span that out to be whatever it is. So if it's a 16 camera job and all 16 cameras are about the same, work out that price once and multiply it by 16.
Now,
And
do you sit down and like kind of figure out those averages and memorize those numbers, or is it just from experience of doing it that you kind of got a ballpark in your head?
I got a spreadsheet. I mean, yes, I
Yeah.
haven't, like, I've done the averages, like, okay, a camera for this system cost me about X number. Embedded NVR versus um, full VMS versus cloud. I'm still dabbling in cloud. I'm only new to the cloud not this year, but within the last calendar year, right? So the
Right.
cloud, I do Cam Cloud and I do Ava right now. So those are
hmm
my two cloud offerings, and they're different. They fit different bills, right? Cam Cloud is good if you just want to strictly put your data on the cloud and your VMS in the cloud really simply. Ava is just huge, robust, and they're obviously the cost way different. Um, but that's it. And I keep the spreadsheet, right? So basically, when I get back from a client, say, for instance, I just had a meeting on Tuesday. Had a meeting
Mhm.
with a client. I gave him the ballpark. I got back down, went into the spreadsheet, kind of went through it, and I said, I need five of these, five of those, three of these, three of those, 45 of those. And then it just kind of calculates that for me because I know the fixed cost, right? I know what per switch. I know the cabling costs. I know this. I know that. And then I just kind of like I add the miscellaneous items. So at the end of it, so once I say I need these many cameras, these models, right? Because I have it down by models. These models, boom, 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 boom. Using this VMS, use those license prices, boom, 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 boom. And then you get down to the bottom and it's like, okay, how much conduit are we talking, right? Because those are the variables. The
Yeah, definitely.
conduit, the miscellaneous. Do I need to bring a new rack? Do I need to bring that? So then I add those at the end, and then all of a sudden you got yourself a final price.
Mm. Now, do you add a buffer on a quote just
Yeah.
as a like, oh shoot, or I needed new
Yes.
drill bits or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. So the drill bits I throw in as a miscellaneous, right? Depending on the job, but you know, I mean, this job is looking at marble, brick, just 100-year-old stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna chew up some bits. So you add a few $100 depending on the size and scope of the job. I did a job for it was a military agency, and they were creating these special like server boxes, and it
Mm-hmm.
was really hard steel. So I had to throw in $80 new bits, and then they even questioned me about it. They said, "What is this, miscellaneous fee?" And I told them flat out, I said, you got hardened steel here. I'm gonna chew up my bits, and I'm gonna buy new bits, and you're gonna pay for them. And they were like, "You're right,
Yeah.
deal,
All right,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Is there
move on."
is there a portion in the bid that you are flexible on? Like if you're looking to win a sale, do you flex on like labor or flex on maybe your markup on a product or maybe that miscellaneous category?
Well, see, I always bid, and this is where people like, I try to in our industry, you want to make 20% on the job. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you want to make. You want to make 20%. Some people do even better. Some people make up to 40,
Mm-hmm.
but when you get into that 40, then the guy making 20 is always going to be able to cut into you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's you got to pick where you're comfortable with. And my market is very competitive because there's a lot of guys out there. They're just pushing the cheapest stuff they can, and they'll just hit you with. And you look at the cost, and it's like, I mean, I've gone against people doing $35 drop labor,
Wow.
and I'm thinking to myself, I can't touch that. I
Yeah.
can't touch it. I wouldn't even get out of the truck for that price.
Yeah, yeah.
So um, it's just a matter of just setting what you can be comfortable with and going with that. And I try to make things as competitive as possible. So usually when I get back to it and they're like, well, I need you to cut $10,000 off, and I'm thinking to myself, take a camera off. I mean, what are you asking me here? Like, this is lean. This is lean. I
Mm-hmm.
do my best to try to make it lean. It's not like I'm making 40-50% markup on these jobs. They've already been discounted. So usually it's a negotiation. And in the end, I tell them basically, well, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because if you want to pay less, what don't you want?
Yeah.
And then we wind up back at the original number when I tell them like, well, let's take some cameras off. Well, I got to have those. Well, okay.
Right, right. So once you win that bid, then you kind of move into now you're going to manage the life of that project. So once you've won it and you accept it, what are kind of your first three steps in starting that project after the bid's been accepted?
Okay. So bid's been accepted. We move on to contract. So the contract goes into much more detail about what I'm going to deliver based on what standards, yada, 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 right? So all the assumptions that were made, the discussions, it goes into my contract. So they have to sign my contract. And upon signature of the contract, you're going to basically you're going to pay half down. That's my process, right? For
Mhm.
big projects, you're going to pay 50% up front, and then you're going to put, another 50 upon completion. If it's a long standing contract, meaning, we're moving several months, right? Then we may do increments after that. But usually the 50% can really get you started, get your materials rolling, and can start the project, right? Because I'm not going to go out there and start spending, 100 grand on equipment of my own money. I'm going, you got to you got to pony up something. So I wait for a check.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's good. So then from a project management standpoint, you're managing the project and that. So your first step is the contract. What kind of comes after that? You gather the materials?
Yeah, gathering the materials. So what I do is schedule what kind of help I need. So I got a couple of guys, and then there's more guys that I kind of like bring on as needed, kind of my 1099s, my part timers. They would love to work with me more. It's just they've got other engagements or they have a full time and they're just kind of moonlight with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I kind of line up all the labor, who I need to bring in for the job. Maybe it's some TKW guys. So I'll bring
Yeah.
those. I mean, I love them. Those are my guys. I know what I'm getting when I bring them.
Right.
So I'll line up the labor. Then I'll go ahead and get the materials, and then we do a breakdown, which is a one time. We'll go ahead and walk through the building one last time, confirm all the camera placements, the doors, this and that. Sometimes we'll put stickies on them. Sometimes we'll put labels inside the jams, just so when we come back, we know exactly these are the doors. You know what I mean? There's no confusion. There was one scenario where I had my guy go out there and he put access control on the wrong door. Like the whole door. Did the whole thing. It was beautiful, but it was the wrong door.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was like, oh, so that's why we kind of label the doors now. Like maybe just a little sticker inside the jam. Nobody knows it, but when my guys go,
Right.
they see, oh, okay, yes, this is the right door. Um, Fortunately, that scenario turned out well because she was like, "Oh well, I was going to do that door anyway in the next phase, so
Yeah, yeah.
let's just do it now and call it a wash." It's like great.
Yeah.
She was
So
great.
if
She was
you
great.
if you had like your perfect setup, the job gets accepted, how long do you like to have before you have to step on site? Like a couple weeks,
I
a
like
month?
2 weeks. I tell everybody, 2 weeks, and more than likely, I'm not on a huge back order now. Obviously, the last 3 years have completely ruined some processes, but I typically tell people it's about 2 weeks to get your stuff. Right now, things are getting better. It depends on the item. Like if I know they're asking for, something with mercury hardware, I'm like, cross your fingers. Or
Yeah.
Perio. Oh my God. Then the Perio job, it was 48 weeks out.
Oh,
It was just outrageous, So there
yeah.
are some things that are still nuts, but for the most part, I tell people, 2 weeks, right? If it's an in stock item, 2 weeks. So that gives me a week to get it. I usually could get it within a week, and then that gives me a week to schedule out the labor, schedule people to get ready, kind of mobilize them and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Show them the prints. We go through like a rundown of this is what it's going to take to do this job. A couple meetings ahead of time with the guys, and then by the second week, we're ready to execute.
Mm, yeah, right on. Awesome. So, kind of moving from the project management into like customer experience. And I like to touch on this one when I go through Bid2Bank because I feel like sometimes we get caught up in the day to day and it's like, okay, next project, schedule guys, go out there, get more work, this and that and the other. And it can be easy to forget the customer in it. It can just be kind of this mill that turns out, projects. So, from a customer experience, can you talk to the listeners about maybe one thing that you feel is most important when it comes to that customer experience?
Yeah. For me, it's the communication with the customer.
Mm,
It's communication with the customer. So, like if I'm doing a camera job, I'll we have a step in our process. We call it final focusing, right? That's back from the old days when you actually
Had to,
focus them.
yeah,
But
had to climb up
final
there.
focus in this day and age is having my customer look at the view and confirm it,
Mm,
right? So when we're putting up cameras, when we get into that stage, final focusing, it's us on the ladders and them either on their mobile app or on a browser saying, little left, little right, I like it, lock it in. You know what
mm,
I mean? So that's kind of that really has helped because I don't like that scenario where they're calling you later and they're like, well, this isn't seeing what I wanted it to see. It's like, no, I want you to be completely satisfied with this. Let's
yeah.
do it right now. Let's do it right now. Let's test it. Let's test everything right now. And also, being upfront with the customer about those little things, right? Because, you don't always see exactly what you need when you do your walkthroughs, right? Um, so having them like, I'm showing them the door. I'm doing the closing test, the infamous health test on the door, the five
Mhm.
seconds, and I'm telling them like this is a problem. You don't want this, right? So just going through everything, showing them, I'm calling them, talking to them, I'm sending updates. So every week or two, I'm giving them an update. I'll give them, I usually keep the full task list of the whole project. So I'll go down the list and I'll put percentages. And I only do 25, 50, 75, 100. I'm not trying to get into, I'm 33% done. Like,
Yeah.
no, and I'll give them the door, and I'll put at the top all the ones that are 100% at the top. So it's kind of like I would say descending order in the completion percentage, and they get a real snapshot of what am I looking at? How much are we? How much is done? And so I like to keep them informed, right? I don't like if they have to reach out to me, I did something wrong. If they have to reach out and say, "Hey, how are we doing?" I did something wrong because
Hmm.
I try to like over communicate. It's like, "Hey, this is where your project stands today. This is what's done. This is what's to be done, and these are maybe you know these 18 card readers that you asked for. They haven't even been delivered yet. So that's just we call that there's a blocker. So don't expect those. So that way when they get because everybody has somebody they report to. So when they have to report this to their shareholders or the board or whoever it is that cut the check, they know exactly where they stand and they don't need to be pestering me. Hey, I need to know where you are with this. And no, you
Hmm.
already know where we are.
Right.
And that
Right.
helps. They enjoy it, they respect it, and they like it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good advice, man. Because I feel like we forget the customer and we can get hung up in it. And especially from a communication perspective,
Yeah.
it's really key to the customer's overall experience how communicative you are. And sometimes we get a little shy on bad news, like those readers didn't show up, or we put access control on the wrong door, or something like that. But overcoming that shyness and just being upfront with the customer and almost like just not being scared to be in front of the customer. I feel like some guys, especially when they're newer or maybe they're just like running out of a van and they're a smaller shop, like they might feel like I'm going to get in front of the customer, I'm going to sell it, and now I just got to get it on. But it's okay to get back in front of the customer and be like, hey, how's it going? I just wanted to let you know this is where we're at. This is how far we've gotten. We had one little, blocker that this isn't going to come in for another week, but don't worry because we're still on time or something like that. So, yeah, that's really good. Um, Moving from that customer experience, now we've kind of made it through the project. Everything's looking good. They like the views, everything like that. You come to the bank. Now you kind of told us you run that half up and then half at completion. That's how I ran when I was doing my stuff. It just makes it so that you have more. You don't have to flow cash or anything like that to get a job started. Is there a payments like software you use, or how do you usually collect money? Because that can sometimes be a hurdle depending on percentages or stuff like that.
Straight cash, homie. Straight cash.
In a briefcase at night. Yeah, cash is obviously still king.
Yeah. No, I can't even tell you the last time I accepted straight cash. But so I prefer a check, and if it's not a check, if it's like card or something, then I gotta hit you with those 3.5 because they
Mhm.
hit me with it. You know
Right.
what I mean? Because you're talking about an industry where you're trying to make 20% on the job. Well, if I lose 3.5 to you, and then, then I'm down to 17, 16 and a half. And, so it tears you up, right? I mean, you are running a business. So that's a cost, and it's not my cost, it's your cost. You decided to pay with a credit card or whatever it is.
Right.
So, but yeah, prefer a check. Now checks are slow. There are some ACH options that I use. QuickBooks is perfect for that. They do the ACH and credit card for you. And the good thing is they balance all the books and the credit card fees, and they just know how to do it. So that's been real easy. I used other processors, and it just wasn't worth my time. Me trying to balance everything. They send you a separate statement, and you're paying out your credit card fees. You're putting in journal transactions. I'm not a bookkeeper. QuickBooks could do it.
Right. Yeah. Do you use QuickBooks?
I do.
Yeah.
QBO.
Yeah. How's your experience been with that? Because I used QuickBooks as well when I was running stuff, and it was all right. It was great on the front end of it, doing all of that stuff. But when I needed tech support or when I needed to know this or that, I had a little trouble with it. But that's not to say that it's not a great product.
QuickBooks Online is a really great product. So I switched. I had a different software. I was using something called Wave Accounting for a while, and it was great. It was a great system. It worked. They even had credit card processing for you, but they didn't do job costing. And that was one of those things. Like I have an outside accountant, so I talked to my accountant, and he's a big construction guy, right? He only will take construction clients. He doesn't take anybody else. So he kind of knows the game really well from his side of things.
Do you
And
recommend that? Like looking for an accountant that is specialized like that?
yes, because there's a lot of things in our field that are different. The whole work in progress and payables. You know what I mean? Because we're not selling TVs here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the job could take you months and months and months, and those months could span your accounting periods. So it gets really messy when, okay, I invoice this guy for 180 grand, but so far only 40 of it has become invoiceable because, so how do you balance that? I only invoice you for 40, for where's the other 140? Well, that's kind of account, so he knows that stuff. He works with construction firms, and he's all into the expenses of it. I mean, he's smart dude, man, but he geeks out on it, and I love it. I love it because he knows this stuff really well. So I got hooked up with him, and been using him ever since. So he was kind of schooling me, and he was like, "Well, what's your job profitability?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And then he was like, "You need to do job costing," and I was like, "Yes, I need to do job costing." So that's why I switched. As of 2023, I switched to QuickBooks Online because they do job costing too.
Can you
And I'll tell you
explain
what,
that for our listeners? What job costing
sure.
is?
So that job costing kind of just puts a bubble around each job. So if I have I bought materials. So when I buy the materials, when I get the bill, I assign them to a project. So if this delayed egress maglock system was for this client, well, I'm going to take the bill and say, okay, this bill is attributed to this client's project, his delayed egress maglocks. And then so the invoice gets attributed to it, the man hours gets attributed to it, the materials, etc. So everything gets attributed to that particular project or job. So at the end of the day, I could look back at the job and say, okay, the job paid 10 grand, 6,000 materials, 3,000 was labor, and 1,000 was profit. So you could look at each job and see how each job is doing, because we are business owners, and if you're being a good steward of the customers, money, you're not going to just be running back. Like if I made a design mistake, I made that mistake, I eat it. You know what I mean? So when
Right.
you can see how well you're doing in terms of estimating and execution, right? Because it's both. You got to estimate properly and you got to execute properly. If you don't, then you wind up your job costs get a little too high, your profits suffer, or even you go red.
Mm.
So it's kind of like the early warning system, right? And a lot of accountants and people who are lenders, they want to see that kind of stuff. They want to see, okay, well, how are you doing with your jobs? Are you staying profitable? And if you're not, then they have to go back to those two factors. Are you estimating properly and are you executing properly, right?
Mm.
And so it really is a measure of efficiency the way I see it, right? Because you got to do those two things correctly in order to stay profitable, stay in business, keep the doors open. So job costing really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Um, Funny enough, I mean, it opened my eyes that I was doing a great job at it, and I didn't even think I was doing a good job. I was thinking, well, I'm doing all right. And then he, went through the numbers with me. He was like, compared to the rest of the industry, so you're doing great. He said you're probably either executing great or estimating great or both. You know,
Yeah.
so
Awesome.
it
Awesome.
gives you that knowledge. It really gives you that knowledge and insight to know that are you doing this exactly the way you planned on it.
Right. Right. Well, every episode, I like to get to the humbling question, and
Uh,
that's this ain't hard for you. You're a humble dude, and you got a noble heart, man. But I like to sometimes get guys on here that I can ping them with a humbling question when the numbers might seem a little inflated. But no, you're good, man, and that like this is the type of content that I want because I feel like I'm learning a little bit, and like I want the people who are listening to learning. So what's like one area in this process from bid to bank that maybe you feel like you could get a little bit better at?
Yeah, it's sales. For me, it's sales. I always have, I've been reading books. Well, I'm lying. Listening to audio books.
Yeah, that's all we
Uh,
do now, man.
Listening to audio books about how to get better at that because that's not my trade, right? I've always been the hyper focused technician guy, right?
Mhm.
I'm always the hyper focused technician guy. So I'm thinking about how to solve it, how to fix it, what do I need to do? And I don't really have that that salesman aura where you just come into a room and everybody loves you and they want to just sign a check. You know what I mean? So I've been working on that personally where because that's part of it. You have to sell. I mean, I got to sell these things. And so far I'm doing all right. I mean, I'm not breaking the bank, but at the same time, it's like I think I could be better at that because it's not that I don't have a solution for your problem and it's
Mm.
not that I don't have the best price. So you got to look at yourself. Like, am I the best salesman to do the job? Because the best salesman is the guy who usually wins it, right? And I don't really compete on price because I can't go that low. There's a
Mhm.
limit, right? So if you're going to go lower than that, then I don't want the job. Like it's just not profitable.
Right.
So you got to move on, And there are other people out there who need your help, need your services. So you just got to, hold your head up and keep pushing, because you are going to lose to the guy doing $35 drops labor. You're going to lose to him all day. I mean,
Yeah.
that you know, yeah, I'd love that job, but I'm not going. I'm not getting down in that mud.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to know what the quality of your work is,
Yeah,
and take a
yeah.
little bit of a stand on it.
Yeah, that's it. Quality is like, listen, I bet you my stuff works, and his won't pass the certifier, but
Yeah. Well,
that's another.
let me get to that bonus question too. This is my favorite question in the podcast because it kind of really opens it up for a lot to draw from for those who are listening in. So, kind of based on your experience, moving from bid to bank, where would you say the focus is most critical for the completion of the job? Like for the job to just be a home run. In that process, what part is the most critical? What focus is the most critical?
I think for me, it's the communication with the customer,
Mm.
because when I don't just do one big acceptance at the end, right? We're not just going to sit around here and walk around the building and verify you've got 75 cameras up in these locations and you got 13 doors and you're going to test every single one of them with your card. It's like, no, I do milestones. So when we get to a certain point, if I haven't already showed you what we I'll demonstrate, you focus the camera yourself, right? We did that together. We focused the camera. So you've already seen that camera. It might even already be on your phone app at this point. When it comes to the doors, we've walked around. You know, we've opened and closed them. I let you swipe your card, showed you the logs, set up your accounts. And I think it's that constant touch, right? The constant touch of, you know, and I also have touch points where I say, is this what you wanted? Right? And that's a powerful question. It's a really powerful question. Some people think it's a stupid question. It's like, oh, you paid for it. Of course you wanted it. No, no, no. Is this what you wanted? Because there's a factor of what we do as security technicians where we design it, right? We design it based on what we heard. I might put access control on the door that led from a hallway, but then all of a sudden, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe that hallway doesn't even matter to you. Maybe nobody even uses that hallway. So then that door that you spent all the money on doesn't make sense anymore. Now, even though it's a done deal, right? Maybe it's already done. We still want to have that conversation because it's not over. It's not like, hey, I got you to sign it, I installed it, and I'm gone. You'll never see me again. No, it's totally different. It's like, no, for me, you're a customer for life. So even though we've done work together, and I want to know, did we get it right? Because for me, it's validation. Because if I made a mistake in the design, I want to know where I went wrong because I want to correct it. And if it was nobody's fault, maybe it's just the usage of the building completely changed over the last 6 months. Well, let's talk about that too. What can we do to help with your new problems, right? So that constant talking to the customer, making sure that they're happy with what they got. Some people are like, oh, you don't want to ask that question because, you might hear the wrong answer. And it's like, no, I do want to hear the wrong answer because if they're not happy, let's talk about that right now. Yeah. Let's not get down 6 months in, I've got 54 doors finished for you. And then you start telling me that they were, not what you wanted. And these people are still being able to get in through these different ways. And so I don't want that. I want, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it early. There's an old saying when I was doing software, fail early, fail fast and fail early. Right? Fail fast and fail early. And I still carry that, right? It's like, if something's wrong, let's talk about it. Let's fix it right now. Let's not sweep it under the rug. Let's get to it right now. If I can fix it, I will fix it. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'll move a door for you. If it was really a mistake on our part, or maybe we just completely messed it up, I'll move that door for you, and we'll move on. And because I want a good customer, I want a happy customer. Like I said, my business is based on, referrals mostly, right? So I bend over for these people because I want them to have exactly what they paid for, and I want them to be happy, which are kind of two different things, but you got to make sure that conversation blends the two, right? Because I can tell you got what you paid for and turn around and walk out the door. And I'd be right. But then at the same token, I don't want that. I want you to be my biggest fan. I want to leave and say, damn, I want that guy to do everything for me. And honestly, it's been that way. It's helped me because I've got some customers, I've gone from doing one building to the whole campus. And it was because they knew, they could call me and I'd either walk them through it on the phone or I won't just ghost them, right? You can call me and I'll take care of you. I'll help you. If you need me to get on the phone or do something like that, sometimes it's billable, sometimes it's not. It just depends. If it's something easy that I know off the top of my head, yeah, man, just go ahead and go in that room and flick that over and it'll come right back on. You know what I mean? So being there, and for me, it's that personal touch. That personal touch is kind of like the difference between me and everybody else.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic, man. Because you're right. Like if you're doing quality work, then word of mouth is your gold. And if word of mouth is your gold, then you have to ask that question because you need that experience for them to be something that they are going to pass on to their friends or other industries or stuff like that. And I think that's a great takeaway, man. I if anybody stopped the podcast before you just said that, they missed out on the whole thing right there because you should be asking your customer, like, is this what you wanted? Because we push like heavy on this podcast a lot that security is a mindset. And so security starts in the mind. If you're going to put security on a building and you want that person to come out of there feeling secure, or the job's not complete, they might get the security. It might actually be a good design and actually secure them more. But if they still are in the building with fear, or they're in the building with troubled, experiences or something like that, or if they're in the building feeling like they paid for something that they really didn't need, then the job's not complete because they're not secure in their mind. And so to ask them the question, is that what you wanted? Because you gave them what they needed because you're a good tech and you know how to put security in. But did you give them what they wanted? They might be like, well, we did need this, yes, but this one feature is something that I really wanted. And then you can mold or shape it into being that feature that they want. And now it's a win-win, because they're walking out of there with what they needed and with what they wanted. So that's gold. That's gold right there.
It sets up trust too, and that's another thing that we got to build in this industry, because security is something you're trusting somebody to do for you, right? Because I have to trust that what you're doing works, what you're doing is accurate. You know what I mean? So I think it's a big deal in our industry to just have that trust, and that trust, it relates over, right? It keeps going. It's like, okay, that's the guy I trusted with my security. So when you ask me who you should get, that's who I trust, because I know he's going to install it correctly, get it working correctly, and he's going to support it. He's not going to disappear on me. Like, I can call him. I have his cell number. And if I have a problem, he might even come out for an emergency call. I have some clients that call me like literally, I'm opening up at 10 o'clock. It's 8:30. I need your help. Can you be here? And I'd just be like, you know what? I know that 10 o'clock you open up. I got you. You're 45 minutes away. I'll make it.
Yeah, because they trust you.
They trust.
Yeah.
You can't say that for everybody. You can't go to a big box, all of these,
right,
colorful brands of national security and be like, oh, can I have somebody there now? And they're going to be like, can you call back during business hours? Right?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, that's all my questions, but man, what good stuff. And I really appreciate you being on this podcast. I love that you're one of those, first guys that I got onto the podcast, because you have been listening. You've been telling me for a long time that you appreciate it. So it's always good to get, guys on here and kind of give back a little bit, and now give to the listeners some of those Trican gang gold nuggets that you fell out of your mouth today. So I really appreciate that. Tell people where they can find you, man, because I know that if I was listening to these podcasts, there might be someone who I listen to. I'm like, man, I'd love to pick his brain on something, or just shoot him a question, or let him know I want to work with him or something like that. So where can they find you?
Yeah, I would say the best way to reach me is on Instagram, and go ahead and look me up, Trican Security, Trican. And I have quite a few people. They'll ask me questions, and I'm happy to help. Like I said, it's community over competition, right? We're all techs, It's not like I'm trying to hoard knowledge to myself. If you want to know it, you can find it. I'll tell it to you. You show me doors. Sometimes people send me pictures of doors and say, "What would you do?" I answer it. It's not about hoarding knowledge. It's about sharing it.
Yeah, for sure. And they can send you those in that Tech Knowledge Worldwide Slack chat. So if you guys if you guys aren't on that, check out at Tech Knowledge WW on Instagram. And that's worldwide, baby, because it's the best techs, best info, not just in the nation. But yeah, we out here doing it. So I thank you, man. Thanks for being here. And that's the end of our podcast today. But follow and subscribe, like the podcast, and share it out to your friends, especially this one. It's going to help them. So thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Baer.
Oh, I saw your Better Days Tech. I meant to mention it at the beginning, but that's Trican Gang right there. So yeah,
that's my man.
Yeah, Jeff Day. So all right, man. Well, thanks for being on.
Thank you.